And we are back, everyone. And without any further delay, let's bring in the land commissioner over in Texas, George P. Bush. George, welcome back.
Great to be with you, Brian.
Hey, listen, I know you got your hands full now. How have some of these executive orders affected your job and your people in Texas?
Well, taking a step back, our state really relies upon oil and gas as about a third of our economy. And if we were our own country, we'd be the 9th largest country in the world. So for us, and really by any measure, this is an incredible impact on a lifeblood of our economy that on average pays an oil and gas field worker over $120,000. The way that this has been done is, without transparency, by the stroke of a pen. And so it creates a lot of uncertainty in the business when you're looking at capital outlays for the coming years to not know what direction this country is going. And people forget that this industry rescued our economy during the Obama recession of 09, 010, when virtually 1 of 3 jobs created across our country was in the oil and gas industry. So instead of being given a pat on the back and thinking about how we create jobs after this pandemic, we're actually slapping this incredible industry in the face and throwing up roadblocks wherever we possibly can and not allowing states like ours to determine the industry's future.
And a lot of Texas oil and gas, I have since learned, invests in clean technology, invests in wind. It's not that you guys are it's not that you're anti-green green technology, right?
That's absolutely right. So people forget Texas is the country's leader in terms of wind energy production. Over 20% of our own power grid is generated through wind, and solar is fastly growing as well. But, Brian, this is about the free markets. We don't have incentives where we, like the Department of Energy, slap on additional benefits to the renewable energy. This is just strictly a free market. And finding the lowest price point for electricity will provide savings to all of our fellow citizens, including in Texas. And so that's the way to approach this, is a slow transition that's transparent so that all industries involved know the direction instead of just an overnight stroke of the pen.
So these are the stats that coming out of Texas. You've lost about 60,000 jobs due to the pandemic because people aren't flying, they're not traveling. The tourism has fallen and it hurts hospitality, but no one's burning oil and gas. It's projected in 2022 you'll lose 120,000 jobs due to the ban on leases on federal land, which is now an executive order, and 100,000 are employed as 100,400 employed in the oil and gas industry as of December 2020. So many livelihoods are at stake. You worry about some other things. What else do you worry about that's coming down the pike from Washington that affects all those jobs?
Well, looking at the Obama playbook, we know that there will be litigation in connection with the Endangered Species Act. So when this was drafted in the late 70s, the intent was to basically list and protect species, but then with science and data help recover these species and then delist them. And that would be a sign of success, right? But since the act was passed, less than 1% of all species that have been listed have been delisted because it's a cottage industry for plaintiffs' attorneys throughout the country. So we've been working during the Trump days and now hopefully we can find some agreement in the Congress to reform the sue and settle tactic where plaintiffs' attorneys get money. But we think 120 different species will attempt to be listed. This affects national readiness. There's one piece of litigation we've been successful on in connection with the golden sheep warbler in Central Texas. If you can believe this, Fort Hood, the largest military installation in our country, has had to shut down some aspects of their preparation because of this listing. So when you're talking about endangered species, but yet endangering national security, you know that this is a law that's gone adrift. But we expect other areas of overreach from the federal government as relates to waters of the U.S. treaty, land management. But really the thrust of what they're attacking is the oil and gas industry, and that's where we're going to be fighting in the courts.
I want you to hear and tell me if you can relate to what Senator John Kennedy said yesterday on our show for Louisiana, Cut 36.
I believe in all of the above energy policy. Wind, solar, geothermal, nuclear. But also oil and gas. We can't run the greatest economy in all of human history without oil and gas. And for President Biden and his people to just say, well, we're going to get rid of all of our oil and gas. And I don't think that circumstance is going to change for a long time. So why would this president intentionally put thousands and thousands of American workers out of work? For what? Our CO2 emissions are going down. China's are going up.
So forget politics. There's a lack of logic.
Yeah, it's bad policy and it's bad politics. So during the campaign, he did say that he wasn't going to ban hydraulic fracturing when he was campaigning in Pennsylvania because you have the Marcellus Shale there, which employs and has created lucrative opportunities for many blue-collar workers. In many parts of our country, we call it the blue-collar boom, especially in the oil and gas fields. But when he gets elected, he then allows the environmental left to then take over policy. And as we've talked about and Senator Kennedy pointed out, it's bad policy, but it's also bad politics because we're going to hold him accountable at the ballot box. So think about all the oil and gas producing states, whether it's red states like Wyoming or blue states even like New Mexico. New Mexico will face a historic budget shortfall with the Democratic leadership there by agreeing with the Biden policies. And so I think it's bad politics in the long run, especially if we're successful in the courthouse, but hold them accountable at the ballot box as well.
So you formed the Texas Defense Task Force, right?
That's correct. So we decided to formalize what we did during the Obama days by assembling not only attorneys that we have at our agency that do a great job of protecting the 13 million acres that we manage day to day, but bringing in organizations like the Texas Public Policy Foundation, the Federalist Society, and other conservative-leaning litigators that can help us throughout the country assemble with other Western states and basically be vigilant and fight back, not only in the courthouse, but also find solutions with what we hope to be the new president. But you know, as has been pointed out on Keystone and the seizure of federal leasing on oil and gas activity, the president and his team has refused to sit down with industry, and they've refused to take our calls. So the only recourse available to us is to take this to the courthouse to work with private industry, ranchers, farmers, landowners that continue to be victimized by federal overreach.
So you're going to need private funding in order to get these courts going, in order to defend your state and the land in Texas.
So we 13 million acres. So for sense of context, that's the size of the state of Indiana. We have wind production, solar generation, but predominantly oil and gas. And we generate about $1 billion a year for public education. So our beneficiaries are the public school kids of the state of Texas. We do have a small legal staff, but we rely upon able pro bono attorneys and other conservative-leaning think tanks throughout the country to help us in these. And we were successful against Obama. We fought back an acquisition or an eminent domain proceeding that was taken on by the Bureau of Land Management. We also delisted successfully a species in Central Texas that stopped residential development in one of our fast-growing areas of our state. And we intend to fight back on oil and gas, diminution of value of real property. When you shut down an industry, we have a legal actionable claim against the federal government that you're basically reducing the value of our most trusted asset, and that's our oil and gas minerals.
What is the XL pipeline being shelved beside the union jobs that it cost and the people that make the steel that are going to make the pipeline in America? What does it mean to the people of Texas? And by the way, we're talking to George P. Bush, Texas Land Commissioner.
So, you know, people forget that because the numbers that we've thrown out there in terms of job losses, those are just direct job losses. That doesn't include the indirect job creation from the oil and gas industry. You know, in the Wall Street Journal, there's a great article during the last oil boom that talked about a barber in West Texas that made $150,000 cutting hair for oil and gas workers on the rig. People forget about the welders. People forget about the carpenters, or even Starbucks baristas that were making 2x what their colleagues would make, say, in Seattle or urban areas throughout our country, just to service the amount of population growth and the dynamism of the economy and the capital investment that comes with it. So, you know, people just don't really appreciate, especially for those that represent coastal areas of our country and have never really spent time in the oil and gas areas of our country, that for generations have provided a meaningful career that pays over $100,000 on average for a lot of people that are saving money for their kids' tuition.
You know, it's amazing, George. Yeah, they don't, but they'll be the first to complain when gas is $3.90 and it used to be $1.25, and they'll blame you guys. They'll gad those rich oil companies. But stop me if I'm wrong here. Doesn't Texas have a lot of refineries? And wasn't that Canadian oil going to be refined in Texas?
It was, yeah. So the Keystone, the component that is yet to be completed was to connect Canada basically to the Bakken Shale, North Dakota, South Dakota through Nebraska, and then make its way to the refinery system in Beaumont, Port Arthur, along the Sabine Pass, the border between Texas and Louisiana. So in essence, there will be an effect on job creation in Texas, but think of all the job creation just from the welding and the steel manufacturing. This is about the best America First policy that you can think of, and that was the Keystone Pipeline. Even Obama, though he described some reticence, he didn't issue an executive order stopping construction of the pipeline. We have 4 members of our Texas congressional delegation that have stepped forward courageously to say, President Biden, this is not good for our state. I believe Senator Manchin has already drafted a letter this week as well. So I think there's actually additional support in the Congress to encourage the president's team to think about this.
Don't you think part of leadership, and your grandfather was like this, and George W. Bush was like this, they admit when they're wrong. I mean, what's wrong going, hey, I'm going to reverse this. It's not working out. That's leadership. It's not being perfect. It's admitting that, you know what, this is going to be too damaging. I think I'm going to pull this back. You know, and I just think at 78 years old, you would think that Joe Biden has very little left to prove or play politics. And especially in your family's case, you guys understand oil and gas.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we have a heritage in it. But, you know, going to President Biden, I mean, he campaigned on the idea that he was going to stick up for the working class and for the working man, the blue collar professionals out there. And he's basically, through the stroke of a pen, shut down the blue collar boom. These are meaningful jobs that people relied upon, that went to college for, or got a trade certification, whether it was post-secondary ed or in high school. And now they're being told that potentially they're out of a job and unable to potentially put food on the table for their family. So, you know, it's more than just ideology. These are people's lives that you're affecting, and job creation is what this is all about. Government needs to get out of the way, allow the free markets to play, and allow education or states to determine a policy that's best for its people, rather than having a top-down driven approach.
Big story in the New York Times today, real quick. So many people are leaving the GOP. 33,000 lost in California, 12,000 lost in Pennsylvania, Arizona, 10,000. In 25 states, 140,000. A lot of the distaste, they say, is over what happened on January 6th. Others is they see somewhat a fracturing of the party. They see a separation between Trump and more traditional elements. What is it going to take to get the Republicans back together?
I think there's nothing more unifying for our side than Joe Biden's policies. You know, so again, he campaigned on this idea that he would be a moderate and smooth talking. But what we're finding in the policy side of things is the exact opposite. And so when we get to the midterm congressional elections, I think we're going to take the good of the Trump administration that defended working class citizens, the good in terms of our foreign policy that didn't talk about intervening in every single crisis abroad, the good as it related to holding China accountable, whether it's from an economic perspective or from a national security standpoint. And so I think we have a great message when you look at the fact that they control the White House, the House, and the Senate, and they're focusing on an impeachment rather than addressing problems that at least my constituents approach me and want some progress on.
Real quick, 30 seconds. Mark Cuban's not playing the national anthem. First professional team not to do it in Texas, by the way, in the country, to not play it before a game. What's your reaction?
It's insulting. You know, I'm patriotic. I firmly believe in the First Amendment, but to completely omit the national anthem, it's insulting to our country. It's unpatriotic, and it's definitely a lack of recognition of what this country is about, and that's recognizing those that protected that flag and created our Constitution.
He's the Texas Land Commissioner, George P. Bush. George, thanks so much. I'll see you on television tomorrow. Appreciate your insight.